Good morning, and welcome to another ironic introduction to another video. Today I'm going to be going over Cull Obsidian's abilities, kind of some thoughts and commentary from me along the way, but understand that this is not like a complete guide. I don't plan on playing this guy very much, and I will go over my reasons for that at the end of the video and stick a timestamp in case you want to skip to that. But this guy is incredibly powerful, and I think it's good that you know at least what he does, just so that you're aware of what's kind of sitting out there in the pool. Or if you have him and you're thinking about ranking him up, I definitely think you shouldn't hesitate, or maybe you want to listen to my reasons for why I don't intend to rank him up, and maybe I'll convince you not to as well. Understand that there is bias in there to begin with. So first things first, let me state that he gains persistent charges throughout the fight, throughout fighting and using him in a matter of ways, and he caps at 10. But the first thing I think is important to point out is his synergy bonuses. And the reason I believe this is important is because when you run someone like Cull Obsidian, you're essentially going to put him in your front line, kind of like your main champion, and you're going to wrap him up in synergies, because you really want to use him in every fight that you possibly can. And if you can't use him in every fight, you might throw in some utility there for other reasons, but for the most part, you would almost just run a different team then. So that said, the first synergy you have is with Corvus Glaive and Proximal Midnight, and what this allows is if you defeat a tech champion, you gain an additional persistent charge at the end of the fight. This can only be done once, and you can't run Corvus Glaive and Proximal Midnight to get 2 charges from one tech champion defeat. And once you've defeated one tech champion, I believe you can only complete it once. So you run one or the other, and I'm sure that the reason you have this option is either for some people don't have both champions, but also there are other synergies at play here. I know people run both Proximal Midnight and Corvus Glaive for other synergies, so that's something to think about. Excuse me. After that, you have a synergy with Ebony Maw and Thanos, and this one is if you end the fight with your route buff active, you get a additional persistent charge at the end of the fight. Again, this is something you can only do once, but it's still arguably better than the one above because you can do this against any champion, not just tech. Doesn't require any kind of scouting, but actually is probably best if you do both at the same time, because then you can get 2 persistent charges right out the gate, ignoring your normal way of getting them. In addition, I bet, without a doubt, Ebony Maw probably has synergies with Proximal Midnight, Corvus Glaive, and Cull Obsidian in addition to as Thanos as well. So really kind of manipulating your synergies is going to be a min-max thing. And this isn't a guide video on that, as I'm not great at that, and that will take a lot of time. So if there's interest, maybe I'll do that in the future. But at the moment, it's just kind of like a commentary. After that, if you run Hulkbuster, Hulk, or Hulk Ragnarok, you do get a Fury buff after launching a special attack, which increases your damage by 50% for 4 seconds, and it's 6 seconds if you're fighting a hero champion. Now, this is something that I think is more valuable in your first or second fight, as when you continue and you progress, your persistent charges are actually going to grant you more damage, and it's something you're going to be having up on a high uptime anyways, and so I think you're getting 200 bonus damage between your special 3 and your persistent charges. So this additional 50% isn't as much as you think proportionally, but in those first fights it has full value. And really, I feel like Cull Obsidian, those first couple fights is where he's really going to struggle, because his damage is pretty off the charts, but it is still relatively balanced towards you kind of have to earn it. So getting this additional 50% in addition to a special 2, which I'll talk about that when I get there, I think is going to be very valuable for him, and maybe something you might consider running just to kind of get through that first fight if you're having trouble. After that, and these ones don't say they don't stack, so I believe you can stack these. So if you run Iron Man Infinity War, Thor Ragnarok, Captain America Infinity War, Heimdall, Doctor Strange, Falcon, War Machine, or Black Panther Civil War, you get a plus 155 critical rating. And I would make the argument that you should run Heimdall regardless, but I'd like to point out that Cull Obsidian's base critical rating is 302. Which is only 13.1%. So if I say you base team, just looking at this, I say you run Ebony Maw, Corvus Glaive, Heimdall, and Hulk Ragnarok, right? You're capitalizing on those first couple of fights. You're adding a 50% increase to your critical rating chance, as well as you're proccing 2 missions right off the gate. Let's say you only want to run Ebony Maw. You want to instead run 2 of these champions down here for like utility, because like you got Iron Man Infinity War is a Swiss Army knife. You've got Captain America Infinity War is got some solid utility. And you've got Thor Ragnarok, who I believe has a synergy with Heimdall. And I believe it's a Fury buff, so you might even be able to use him and Thor Ragnarok instead of the Hulk. Just kind of like a lot of min-max you can do with these synergies, but I do think these critical ratings have more value, in particular with Cull Obsidian, just because his critical rating is so low. So being able to double it just by taking 2 of these champions, and some of these champions are really, really good to have on your team anyways, and I would make the argument you should put Heimdall on your team regardless, just because when you run someone like Cull Obsidian, you don't want him to die, you don't want to lose those charges. So moving on, his awakened ability, I don't have it unlocked yet, is when Route enters a cooldown, Cull's aggression is awarded with a Fury buff, and as well as I believe that when you awaken him, from what I've heard, is that you can use Route more than once in a fight. Perhaps I'm wrong, but I'll be able to confirm on that in the description when I awaken him in 3 days. Or if someone wants to comment if they've done research that I haven't, I pretty much abstained from watching any videos except for like I saw like a gif of like a 10,000 crit, because I want this content to be original. I don't want people to like be like, oh, someone else said that. I want you to know that I really like stayed away from watching any videos before this, just so that I could make this content and not be like copying someone else. I don't really like plagiarism. So after this, I can't wait to go watch gameplay, because I hear he's super awesome and I'm like really excited. But I just want this to be my thoughts first. After that, Cull Obsidian has 3 missions to complete. He does these by knocking out any champion, knocking out any Avenger, or knocking out a champion while he is above 95% health without the combo meter resetting during the fight. And so you can do any of these as many times as you want, and you could theoretically proc all 3 every single fight, stacking up to 10. Keep in mind that you can't go higher. And ideally, you actually do want to proc all 3, because his buffs is actually affected by the number of favors you have, or persistent charges. And so at the beginning of the fight, Thanos' favor buff is gained per persistent charge, and these buffs last for 10 seconds, and the buff itself is different depending on how many buffs how many favor stacks you have. And every time you attack your enemy, the duration, like the timer that is ticking down on your buff, is paused for 1 second, which is just kind of fancy wording for saying that every time you attack an enemy, the buff is extended for 1 second. So as far as what buffs you get, at 1 persistent charge, you get plus 10% attack for each persistent charge, so that stacks all the way up to 100%. At 3 persistent charges, you get 37.76 critical damage rating, which stacks all the way up to 377.6 critical damage rating, which I would like to point out is around 75%. I don't have a calculator, so I want to say around 75% of his critical damage rating already, which is just crazy how much you're boosting that up. And that's why you see like that gif of like the crazy amounts of damage he's doing, because 100% bonus attack plus 300, almost like 1.75 the amount of critical damage in general is just crazy. And I'm sure those damage numbers stack to be huge. And at 5 persistent charges, you gain true accuracy, which allows you to ignore evasion and auto block. This kind of has like some stacking with some of his later abilities, but it's really nice to just have that. Particularly, it's important to note that I feel like in the quests, this comes up more on boss nodes, and so even at 5, like you don't have to worry about stacking that up right away, because typically it's something that you will have had plenty of time to bring Cull Obsidian up to that many persistent charges. And at 8 plus, the route buff gains 5% increased duration, which, to give you an idea, at 10 stacks of persistent charge, this would be a 50% increased duration, which would mean that your route buff, which is 8 seconds, would instead be 12 seconds, which is just a crazy long time to have that up for. Cull Obsidian's well-timed block is able to block projectiles, which is like something they didn't need to give him. Like, it's awesome that he gets this. It makes him so much more powerful. Wow, that's a defensive capability he did not need. And something you should be aware of when you're fighting him. If you dash back and hold block, this is how you activate his route buff, which is a base 8 seconds and causes opponents to suffer 100% auto block ability accuracy. So this is good because if you don't have those 5 persistent charges yet, you can still handle auto blockers if you need to. It should be noted that this isn't true accuracy. It's just specifically, nerfing auto block ability accuracy. In addition, you gain 120% like energy after damage, which is great because Cull Obsidian does physical damage, and kind of like mix and matching those damages is like a really good way to maximize damage in like Alliance War when people are taking proficiency masteries for like reduced energy damage or reduced physical damage. No matter how they stack them, they're still going to be taking a good deal of damage from your hits during your route. Granted, it only reduces the damage a little bit, but those masteries values are diminished as a result of your mixed damage. And when you use a heavy attack, you have a 50% chance per strike on your heavy attack to inflict an armor break debuff, reducing armor by 1200, which is like a great amount on an armor break, for 11 seconds. And for each persistent charge, the chance of landing an armor break is increased by 15%, as well as the duration is increased by 15%. So at 10 persistent charges, this is 150% increased duration, which would be roughly 17 seconds or so. Mouthful. This guy does a lot. I mean, like, this is like 2 pages of text. So his special attacks reduces the opponent's armor up ability accuracy by 100% during his special attacks, which I feel is something they pretty much threw in there for, like, I don't know, Iron Man or maybe like Ultron, other people who have like persistent armor ups. So that's kind of like a nice cherry. That might have more to it than I know. I'm just not well versed in the game enough to know. I just think that's kind of neat. His special one grants you a 10 combo shield bonus, or buffs, and so essentially you can withstand 10 hits without losing your combo meter. In Alliance War, this is like really cool if you're like popping a invulnerability boost for like 3 to 5 hits. I've only done the 3 ones, so I don't know what the larger ones are. But if you pop your special one and then that with the invulnerability, in a fight, you could essentially guarantee that you stay above 95% and don't lose your combo meter just by pressing special 1. But for the most part, I think people are going to skip straight to special 2, as like if you're a good enough player, you don't have to worry about getting hit to begin with, and your special 2 will have an 80% chance to, again, fancy wording, but essentially extend the duration of your armor break debuffs on your opponent for 2 seconds. In addition, you have a 100% chance to stun for 2 seconds. And this is where I mentioned the Hulk Buster, and the Hulk Ragnarok synergy, where it stuns, where you get a Fury buff for 4 seconds. This 2-second stun, combined with that synergy, is an opportunity for you to really hammer in some damage. With that Fury buff, you could use this moment to like proc another armor break if you want. You could use this moment to just go full combo. I'm sure there's like min-maxing of people realizing of like what combos you can use to get in and get maximum damage as well as maximum utility. I'm just not aware, and I'm sure that that's greatly affected by Limber. But 2 seconds is a solid stun. You can definitely comfortably get a heavy attack in there if you want to get that armor break. And then finally, his special 3, and keep in mind this is something you'll really only be using once you have some persistent charges, as when you use his special 3, your Thanos' favors buffs re-proc, right? So ideally at 10 seconds plus attacking, you would have wanted that buff to have lasted you like 18 to 25 seconds if you could, by playing aggressively. More perhaps, I just haven't had a lot of experience, so I don't know how far you can push that. And then you push to your special 3 once your persistent charges have already been built up, and then you proc special 3, and in this manner you can have a really large uptime on your buffs. In addition to that, when you press special 3, you get an additional 10% attack for each persistent charge. So in this way, between the 10% you were already getting and the 10% from the special 3, I mean, you're doing 300% damage, which is just crazy. Not to mention, if you're going to crit and your crit's doing like an additional 200% damage, that's where I'm sure that meme of like how much damage he does comes from. And that's it for Cull Obsidian. Those are his abilities. If this video feels like I'm like really well rehearsed, I apologize. I do try to make these a little less scripted, but I found out that my last video, the screen froze, because that's like a problem that seems to plague me a lot. I'll have to send in a support ticket. But I had to like restart, and that was a drag. But that said, at this point, I want to talk about why I'm not going to use Cull Obsidian. And in no manner am I trying to like say I think you shouldn't. I just think that I'm in a position where my roster is stacked. Like without a doubt, I know my roster is stacked. Not Sentry. That's not what I was trying to highlight. I don't have a great 5-star pool, but I did only get the 4-star one. And maybe if I had the 5-star one, I'd feel different. But the way I look at my roster, I think about, okay, well, what do I need? So first things first, I need 5 Alliance War Defenders, which is something that I'm working on, but I don't feel Cull Obsidian is a defender. So already I'm not ranking him up for that reason. But for defense right now, I threw in Heimdall, OG Vision, Karnak, Symbiote Supreme, and Nebula. And I'm working on ranking up some other options, but that's where I'm at. And then after that, I say, okay, I'm also going to need 3 attackers. So on attack, I'm going to bring Hyperion, Omega Red, and Hulk Ragnarok, as I am planning on taking either the Bleed or the Poison and Bleed nodes in my map with my Alliance. And so I really want to capitalize on that, especially since I already run Suicide Masteries and Willpower. And then I think, okay, I need some people for Alliance Quest. Now, this is the only moment where I kind of hesitate and say, well, I could use a little bit more on Alliance Quest, as right now I'm only bringing Ronin, Black Widow, and Luke Cage, and I'm still in the process of leveling Luke Cage up. He's rank 4, but kind of low level. But the truth is that I already don't like Cull Obsidian, so, and I love Black Widow, and so I'm just going to keep where I'm at, to be honest. Yeah, I don't have a very good reason for it. I am working on bringing Star-Lord up. I'm working on bringing Blade up, and Proxima Midnight up, and Magic up. So I have a lot of other options besides Cull Obsidian, and I don't feel like I'm really missing out. So as far as like base rosters, that's where I'm standing. But then I think about like, okay, well, what about the utility that Cull Obsidian offers? So he offers Armor Break. He offers True Accuracy, right? So when it comes to Armor Break, I do have Heimdall. And when it comes to True Accuracy, I have Heimdall. So when I'm like pushing quests and like trying to clear content, I'm in a position where like my base 5 for when I'm like really pushing content that I struggle with right now is Hyperion, Vision, Omega Red, Hulk Ragnarok, and Heimdall. And I'll throw Ronin in there for any one of the 4 except for Heimdall, just because I want to. And I'm like blessed in this to have this option of like utility. And so I don't really feel like I need to be bringing an additional anti-auto evade, as I personally feel that Ronin has a solid kit for auto evade, as proccing a cruelty every time someone auto evades is great. And it's just a matter of knowing how to attack into an auto evade without getting punished, right? Being mindful of, oh, okay, they evaded, and then dashing back. And with Ronin, you kind of get 2 cruelty buffs every time. And so there's like a niche playstyle there that I think is really fun. And I'm not in a point in the story where I feel I need to rank Cull Obsidian up in order to like get that utility, but also like I have Proxima Midnight for True Accuracy if I needed. I have just so many options that I don't think I need to. And so while I recognize he's overpowered, I also know that I run Suicide Masteries. And to be honest, I think there are 2 major arguments, you know, besides the fact that I have a stacked roster from grinding so much, / luck, because I mean a huge part of this game is opening crystals and getting lucky. But the 2 major reasons I have is personal bias. I don't like Cull Obsidian. I don't like the way he looks. I don't like the character that's in the movies. Kind of makes me just like frustrated. So I don't want to play him if I can avoid it, which is a terrible way to play any game. And for the most part, I don't let that decide my decisions. But if I can get away with it, I do. And then second, which is the actual viable reason, this guy is not suicide friendly at all, right? So like you want to be above 95% in order to proc an additional mission. And you want to be spamming your special too. Like early on, you are going to be spamming the heck out of your special 2 for that stun, and that is not something I want to do. I mean, all the other champions I run, like some of them you really benefit from spamming your specials, but like I put them off in a situation where I don't need to. So for example, you've got Symbiote Supreme, and your goal with Symbiote Supreme is to save for special 3. So if I'm using him, I save for special 3, and then it's a special 2 spam abuse. But the truth is, once you get your special 3 off with Symbiote Supreme, you spam special 2, and by the time you've gotten 2 or 3 special 2s off, they're dead. And really, if I was running him, it wouldn't be in an alliance war where that health pool would matter. It would be in a quest, and I would only use him 1 or 2 times specifically as a counter for utility. But like I run Hulk Ragnarok, he's poison immune, and for the most part I don't have to worry about spamming his specials because he's just got so much health and is tanky to begin with. But also I typically just wait for a special 3 or only use his special 1 for the heal block, and taking a 5% health loss in order to get a heal block out there is very valuable. I don't see any problem with that, and I don't need a stun to get damage in, at least for where I'm at. You've got Omega Red, where Omega Red, you do spam his 2 a lot, but Omega Red is like the definition of suicide friendly, just because his SP3 heals a ton of health. You got Hyperion, who does benefit a lot. Like his SP1 is an Incinerate, his SP2 is a Stun, but his SP3 is just a ton of damage, right? So one of my favorite things to do is get a parry in, get a heavy attack in, and then press special 3. And you know, his special 2 does a lot of damage, so you can always just end the fight that way. Ronin, I've made a guide on why I think you don't use any of his specials to begin with, and only ever use special 3 for free damage. So in this manner, you really see that like I don't feel the need to rank someone up at this point. And I realize that people are making videos of Cull Obsidian. I'm gonna go watch the one where Seaton does a like rank up and gameplay video of him taking it through variant, which I'm super excited. So maybe when I'm at the stage where I'm clearing variant, I'll bring Cull Obsidian. But the truth of the matter is I would just rather rank someone else up and do it with them. That's how I feel. And if I'm at the point where I'm like, no, I need that absurd amounts of damage in order to do this, then that's what I'll do. Or maybe one day I want to make up a gameplay, or I change my decision on whether or not I like him or not to begin with. That's what I'll do. But for right now, he's not suicide friendly. I don't need him for defense. My attack lineup is solid, and Proximo Midnight's really fun to play. I'm planning to use my rank ups on the champion here, as he is a solid defender, and defenders is really what I'm missing. So that's going to be my next move. And I'm really struggling with ISO. I'm hard gated by ISO. That's why you see all these arrows on champions, is like I have the ability to upgrade so many people, like, but I'm already unable to rank up the ones I have. Like Luke Cage is far from being maxed. I'm trying to bring Magic. She's far from being maxed. I haven't even started on Blade. So I'm really just trying to being picky and choosy with what I have. So if you're like me, where you have a lot of options or utility, or you can meet the the utility that Cull Obsidian offers, which I would say is, do you have big damage? Are you running suicides? Because if you're running suicides, I would say don't run Cull Obsidian off the recoil alone. Just not being able to comfortably spam special 2 really makes Cull Obsidian tough to use in quests, because you could say use his special 2 to clear the first 2 fights and then only use his special 3, but then you're losing that guaranteed stun, which is just a ton of damage and a bunch of time to punish, especially considering your buff is already extended just by attacking. So getting a stun in for 2 seconds gives you an opportunity to extend your buff for 5 seconds. And so you lose too much, I feel, with the recoil. But yeah, if you're in this position where you have armor breaks, you have true accuracy, you have big damage, I don't think you need to rank up Cull Obsidian. You will be missing out on a powerhouse, but that's something I'm okay with for right now. That said, sorry for being a little talky, but that's where I'm at. Those are my thoughts, and I'll talk to you later.